Hello my crafty friends, it's Bevel here over at Crafting Chaos, and I'm here with the second video, if you will, on the contemporary or stylised flower. This is the one that I made and showed you how to make in the last video, and I'm going to use that as a starting point for this one. Okay, so that's kind of where we started off, and this is where I've took it to now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw myself kind of a stem, and it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. I'll just go back a little step. Just let me undo that and now start. So I'm selecting this sort of, I can either do it with this or you can draw a freehand path. So freehand path will draw the line that you draw, like so. So if you were drawing a stem, you would try to get sort of a stem shape by using that to create it, like so. And then if we click on this now, we can close the path by hitting this one, open and close the outline. So now we've got a closed path. So that's how we could draw the stem. Alternatively, if you're not confident enough drawing, you can use the second option, which is to do it point to point, if you will. So I'm just roughly drawing how I want my stem shape to be, and then I'm going to come up, and every time I click I'm leaving a node, and I want to go a little bit narrower towards the top, and then double click to anchor it. And that's the alternative way of drawing a stem. So you've got your freehand tool to draw it or the point to point. Now once you've got the basic stem drawn, we can colour it with, we can shade it in with some green so we can see that we're going to use that for stems. And I find that if I've done a stem freehand or even using the point to point node, and I'm just going to flip that one just so that it's the opposite way around, that we've got, I've never actually managed to draw two that are exactly the same. And if you double click, you can see the nodes. Double click that one, you can see the nodes. So if there's a node you don't particularly like, you can actually alter it there. So you can take it out, which makes it thinner, or undo it, and you can double click it and you can move it in if you think it's a bit too fat, like so. So you can adjust that to your heart's content. Now to make the flower, what I did, so I'm just going to move the stems off to the side and we'll come back to those later. First of all, we need to choose a shape. So I'm going down in the shapes gallery and I'm going to find a shape. Now the shape that I'm going to choose is actually, for today's tutorial, is going to be this egg shape. One of my favourite shapes. It can be used for all kinds of different things, and I'm going to make it short and stout, if you will. So a little fat one. And then I'm going to, and now this is a tool that I wanted to just explain in a little bit more detail, because I've been asked to explain about the offset. Now when we click on our shape, so what we're going to do is want to make an exact sort of shape that matches this one, and we can either make it so that it goes inwards by a small amount. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this shape so you can see what we're looking at. So it'll create a line just inside. So for example, supposing we were going to use this for something and we wanted to create a stitch line just inside, a 4-stitch line that we wanted the scan and cut to do for us. This is one time when we might use the offset. So we could, if we wanted, just do a duplicate, take a duplicate of that, and we could just resize it by maintaining the aspect ratio here. And to a point, that works. Okay. But a simpler way, particularly if you want it to be a particular offset, so by a particular amount, we've got this option. So while you click on the offset line, and here you can set how much you want it to be. So if you want it to be a really small one, you can do a 0.4, like so, and say OK. And that creates, if I zoom in, a really small offset that is exactly 0.04 of an inch from the place where we started from, which was the outer one. Now, so I was saying about creating a 4-stitch line. If we wanted to do that, we could select the offset. I'd probably go something like 0.08, and I want to go inwards. I want to keep it round because I don't want any sharp curves, and just say OK. And now, as that's done it automatically for us, and then all we need to do is just click on up here where we can select the line pattern and just choose that stitch. Okay, so that now we could cut it. This one we would then set the outer one as a cutting line, and the inner one we'd make it a drawing line, so that the scan and cut, when you send it across and you say group, then when you send that across to the scan and cut, it knows what you want it to do with each operation. But I'm just going to undo that because that's not what I want to do. Okay, so we're just going to keep going till we've got rid of that offset. Another time when you might want to create an offset, particularly if you've got an odd shape, so something that's not a regular shape, you might want to create an offset as a massive matting layer, because you might want 1/4 of an inch matting layer all the way around your shape. So then you'd go on, create an offset, and this time you'd select the outward selection. And again, because it's a rounded shape, would leave us round. If it was a square or a rectangle or something similar with straightened corners, we'd choose bevel, and I'll show you the difference. So if I bring on, say now, before we go, cancel that, and I'll show you both together. So if I bring on a triangle, and you'll see what I mean, the difference now. So just send that away so we can see the triangle. So we've got two shapes now. We've got a triangle and this egg shape, if you will. So if we create an offset here and we keep it round 0.8, and we want it to go now outwards to create a matting layer, if you will, and you can see where it's going to form on the actual dialog box here. Gives you an idea, an indication. Inward would go that way, and outward would give us an outward offset. And if we say OK, that's give us a perfect mat. So what we could do is, if I put this some colour, if I just give this, send that one to the back so that it's underneath the smaller one. Now if I gave that some colour, say for example grey, and then we wanted to have the back layer a different colour, let's say brown, that's what you'd get. You'd cut that one out, and you'd have a perfect matting layer for your project. Now if I go on this triangle and we do the same offset, leaving it rounded, look what happens to the edges of the triangle. They become rounded rather than a point, which is fine if that's the look you are going for. But if you want to maintain that sharp sort of corner edge, if we undo, we can select the shape and choose offset, but to go on the bevel. That won't keep the corner. So if we say OK now, it keeps it more of the shape that it was to start with. It's still not going to be sort of exactly the right sort of corner if you want that point. Now if you wanted to do a duplicate and shrink that down proportionally, because it's a fairly standard shape, that's how you would do it in this case. So then you'd line that up centrally and vertically. Not vertically, because it won't let you do that, because obviously it's not the same. But that would give you the idea of it. But it might not be perfect, okay? Because that one does it so that it's absolute, okay? So that is the offset tool. So it's used, and it's used particularly for when you've got like unusual shapes that you might struggle to get. If you did just a duplicate of something strange like that and you resize it using maintain aspect ratio, the shape you end up with might not fit identically, and they might have gone a bit too small. And to show you what I'm actually meaning now, that's too big. So let's just try that again. Moving this off, moving this on. You can see how it sometimes doesn't fit the shape back in perfectly. Like I'm struggling to map that in now, even though it's smaller and it's been increased by the same amount. Now if you do the same thing with the offset and go inward, and you want to go that, or even a bit bigger, that will fit perfectly inside where your own matting layer wouldn't if you just resized it. So that's the layer if you do the offset that fits in there perfectly. If you just make that smaller by duplicating it and then shrinking it down a little bit, it doesn't shrink it so that it fits properly for a matting layer. So hopefully that explains why you might use the offset option, because that will give you that perfect matting layer. And again, if you wanted to do one inward from that and take the spacing down a bit, again, that's going to give you the perfect matting layer for the shape that you've got on the screen. So there's different ways to do things, and it depends for the look you're going for, but that's what the offset does. It will either create an offset that's a fixed amount away from your original line, or a fixed amount inwards from your original line. And for something like, if I just show you now, if I do, say for example, I take this one and I'm going to shrink it down so that I can put it in the middle here, and I'm going to select both and line them up centrally. Then I'm going to knock one shape out of the other. So what we've actually got now is like a squashed up donut shape. Now that, if I just take the colour down a little bit, might not be as easy to see that that's now not got anything in the middle. You can see the mat behind. It's just a donut. Now if I wanted to do an offset of that one, I can untick this one, which will then give me an offset inside and outside. So if I select it and I want to go inward, excuse me a second, or outward, and I wanted to keep it both the same, or maybe I want to go inward and give it both. So now it's going to put an edge around each. And you see how that's made an edge around the inner and the outer shape, so that then you could put 4 stitching around the inner and the outer. You'd have a problem possibly doing that any other way. So that is why your offset is so useful. So I know I've spent a little bit of time on offset now, so I'm going to move on from that. But I hope that clears up how useful the offset button is, if you will. So I'm just going to undo that and go back to my oval, if it'll let me go far enough back. There we go. And I'm going to zoom out so we can see the mat again. So we've still got, oh, gone miles too far there. Display, zoom to fit mat. So now we can see. So we're aiming for something similar. Now I'm never going to be able to recreate that exactly, but I can go through the process of what I actually did. So basically, I created an offset of that inward by about 0.16 inches. Okay, in fact, it was a little bit higher than that, so we'll just repeat that. Offset, I think it was about 1/4 of an inch. So that's that. So now we need to remove that middle piece, if you will, so that we can weld together. If we weld it now, we'll just end up welding the whole thing back together, and we won't have the hole in the middle, which is what we want. So the first step is to edit, process the overlap and subtract. Now, if I just go back a step and show you the difference. So if I select both of those and make a duplicate, if I was to then make another duplicate and just rotate it slightly and then say, okay, so I want to weld those two together like they're a petal, look what happens. It just welds the entire lot together. But if I then, so I'm going to just delete that. If I do the process the overlap and subtract first, it knocks out the centre, leaving me that shape, which I can now duplicate, rotate, get it to a position where I think it makes a nice petal, like so. Then I can select both and weld, and now you can see the difference, that it's actually welded those two together now. So all I did then was duplicated those two, so you can either right click and duplicate or use your shortcut. Then I rotated those and put them towards my flower as well, like so, so that we're starting to get that flower shape. So I'm just going to move this one. So this is how I came up with the design. So just by placing linked petals together and welding them like so. And then I went and I duplicated that one, so then we've got 4, and I can rotate that so it's offset against the other petals that are there, and I can move it and position it, rotate it, make it bigger, make it smaller, and just get it into a position where I think it looks good, and I think it looks okay there. So I'm now going to select both of those and weld them. So now can you see how we're getting this shape for a flower? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get a circle to get this central part. So I'm going to bring on a circle, and then I'm going to shrink it down, and I'm going to make a duplicate of that, move it to the side. Then I'm just going to position this. I need it to be a little bit bigger, because what I want to do is have a bit of a middle to the centre of my flower-ish. Might not be perfectly central, but I've selected the circle and the flower, and I'm going to hit weld. And that's welded those parts together. So now if I go on to my colours and put a colour in, you can see that's where we're heading. Next, what I want to do, I can see that I've got an area there that might cause me a bit of an issue. And if this happens, don't start all over again. Just zoom in so you can see the area. And the area that I'm talking about is this small bit here. My knife might struggle to get around that little bit. So all I'm going to do is double click to expose the nodes. And then I'm just going to drag an imaginary box around the nodes that I don't want. Those. They'll be turned turquoise, and then hit the minus button, minus the nodes up here, and that will make them disappear. We can then go on display and zoom to fit to matte size. So now that's got rid of that problematic area for us. The next thing I did, so I'm just going to move that off to the side for now, and I'm going to bring on this kind of ovally shape now. So I'm looking in the ovals, and I want the smallest of the ovals, if you will, or the squashed in oval. And I'm going to do the same step that I did with the last one, and that is I'm going to go on the second icon down and select offset, keep it at 0.24 and say OK. Then I'm going to select both of those. I've selected that one as well, so I don't want that. Get over there, you. I just want those two. So I'm going to bring those to this thing, and then I'm going to process the overlap and subtract. So now again, that's made it so that I've now got this sort of look here. Now I can still resize and reshape and do whatever I want, so I just wanted to just make that a little bit narrower, but a little bit, maybe not, maybe a little bit longer rather than narrower. So that's that kind of look. So all I did then is make a duplicate of that, and I kind of rotated that round so that it kind of had some different sized leaves sticking out. Maybe if it's a little bit too long, you can always shrink it back in. Make another duplicate, do the same thing, and it doesn't matter if they're all not the same size, because that's the style that at this moment in time I'm going for, this really eclectic sort of style, really stylized contemporary flower look. So I'm just going to position a couple of those, and I'm going to just make that a little bit less sticky out, if you will, than the other one. Then I'll duplicate that one, and I'm going to use the flip this time. I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to move it across to this side here, like so. And then I think we're not too bad, and I might just rotate it just ever so slightly this way and move it down a little. Okay, so you mess around with that until you're happy. Then select them all and weld them. So now you've got that crazy daisy shape, if you will. Now what I did then was, with my circle selected, put it in the middle, and all I'm aiming to do now is make a centre for my flower. So I'm going to just right click, arrange, and bring that to the front so that it's on top of this flower head that we've just created. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got it lined up where I've got the area all welded together, then I'm going to select the circle and the shape, and we're going to subtract, and that will punch out the hole. And I'm just going to leave that off to the side because I'm going to use that for my leaves shortly. So then you can position your stem, and if you think your stem is too big for your flower, that's fine, because at this stage now we could resize the flower head down a little so it's not quite so big, and we can rotate it so it fits on our stem better. So if we go down, we can use the circle here at the top to rotate so that we can get it to fit our stem nicely. And when we're happy with the position, select the stem and the flower and weld. So now we've got the flower connected to the stem, and all we need to do now is make a duplicate of this one, which we're going to make into leaves. And I'm just going to overlap them, and I kind of overlap them, made one quite a bit smaller than the other first of all, like so. Overlapped them so they look something like that. Like I said, you can play around with this and it's never going to end up being the same twice. Now if I just want to select those two that I've just created, so I'm going to weld those, and then I'm going to get a duplicate of those so that I can work with that later. I'm going to shrink this one down so it matches, it's more in keeping with the size of my flower, and I'm going to attach this one here. I might just make it a little bit smaller still, and I'm going to leave it sort of on the stem so it's overlapping the stem a little. And then this one I'm going to flip it first, then I'm going to rotate, then I'm going to resize because I'm getting the angle, and I'm going to resize it down, maybe not quite so, I might make it a little bit bigger, and then I can bring it across, offer it up to my flower, and then I'm going to select all of the flower in the leaves, and I'm going to finally weld everything together. So that's my really stylized flower. And obviously, so now display fit to mat, you can resize that so it's smaller if you wish. So you can see it's not identical by any means to my original flower, but it means that you're going to make these flowers and none are going to be exactly alike. So that's the process that I used. Now, what you can do at this stage is if you wanted to create a matting layer, so I'm going to use the offset function, I want it to just do the outer layer of my shape only, so I need it to be going outward. I want it to leave just the outside edge, not the whole thing. I don't want it to be quite that big, maybe about 0.12, and I'm going to say OK. And you can see that now if I fill that with colour, that's given me a shape. If I just take the opacity down a little, you've got a matting layer for that particular shape, and it's separate. So you can make it a smaller matting layer if you wish. So if you don't quite like it being that fat, you can make it right down to 0.04, which is a very small matting layer. And if we give that a little bit of colour, you can see that that is also the perfect matting layer for that shape. And if we take the opacity down on this, so that you can see the flower underneath, I could have raised the flower to the top. If we zoom right in, you can see that that's given us a perfect border all the way around. Now that would have been very, very difficult to do any other way than using the offset icon there, this offset button. Okay, now if you did want, for some reason, and I'm not beyond the realms that you might, you could create an offset outward and just make it so that it does the offset of everything. So now if we move that away, it's actually made you a cutting file that gives you, I'm just going to fill that with some colour, and you can see what I'm saying. So that's got that. Now you can see that all these pieces are going to cut out, so don't need to worry if that concerns you and you don't want it to look like that on the screen. The only thing you need to do is just go on this icon, break it apart, and then if we catch the top one, it'll leave behind all the cut pieces there, which you can then just grab and delete like so, and that will give you, not that one, this one. And if I zoom back out so you can see what I'm doing, display fit to mat. So now that's given us, we've got a larger fat matting layer, if you will, for this one. So that's created a fat sort of big layer. We've created a small, thin, just a nice tiny bit of white or whatever colour you're going to do the layer in for this one. So just a matting layer, so only a fraction of an inch showing all the way around. Or now we've made one that's a matting layer that takes, if we move this one onto this one, so we just need to move that one to the back so that the green one's on top. And if we position it carefully, we can see we've got a matting layer for the top flower in a different colour from the blue one. If we zoom in, you'll see. So you've got, but it's given you, it's given you a matting layer that has all the little parts cut out as well, rather than just a solid matting layer like your other piece. And it does fit perfectly. If I zoom out a little bit, I can't really see what I'm doing, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So I'm just zooming out so that then I can, oh, I've clicked it again. Let's go display fit to mat, and we'll make sure we're on the selection tool, and you can just use your arrow keys. And it really would be better if I'm moving the green piece because I can see what I need to do more. And it does fit perfectly. Now, to create that any other way than using the offset tool, I don't know how you could do that. That's the only way I know how. So that is how useful the offset tool is. Okay, so I hope this video has been useful. I hope you like my stylized flower. I'll be saving the files that I've created, and I will as always make the file available freely for you to download over on my blog at bevel10.blogspot.com. Sorry, I fell over my own blog's name then. Although if you do go over there and you do subscribe, I'll leave you the stem as well in case you want to use a different stem and trim it off and use a different one. If you do go over to my blog, can I just encourage you, please leave comments and please subscribe, and maybe set the bell icon so that you know and you are alerted when I upload files, because I sometimes put extras on to the blog that might not come onto YouTube, so you can always have a look over there. I've got lots of free files over there now. There's like pages of them. And also for most files that are over there, there are videos of how to create them for yourselves. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please remember to give it a big thumbs up. Hit the bell icon so that you get alerted when new videos are uploaded. And make sure you let your friends know where they can find me. Okay, so let's see you next time. Thanks for watching. And it's bye from Crafty Chaos Headquarters. Bye.